Hello, welcome to my presentation on Johann Sebastian Bach. My name is Alexander Doyle. When looking at the early life of Johann Sebastian Bach, he was born March 21st, 1685. He came from a prestigious family of musicians and was the youngest child of his parents, Johann Ambrosius Bach and Elizabeth Lamhert. Johann Sebastian Bach actually had a gift with his voice, his singing voice, and he actually joined a voice choir when he was young. However, he strained his voice eventually during that choir, which led him to developing more interest in other musical aspects, such as becoming an organist after gaining inspiration from the organist George Baum. He was eventually hired by Johann Urs, Duke of Weimar, to become part of the orchestra in Weimar during 1703. And then around 1707, Johann Sebastian Bach married his cousin, Mary Barbara Bach. And during that time, he created many church cantatas, and he also had 7 children with his wife, with a few of them dying as infants. And if you can see here, this is Johann Sebastian Bach's wife, as well as right here, his family demonstrated right here. All this information that I found was also from Marshall and Emery's article on Johann Sebastian Bach, as well as the article from bibliography.com called Johann Sebastian Bach. So when looking at a few of the pieces he made when he was younger, these included the Capriccio sopra la lontananza del suo fratello dilettissimo, the Passacaglia in C minor, and even one of his more famous ones, Toccata and Fugue in D minor. This event, again, was from Marshall and Emery's article on Johann Sebastian Bach. And all these pieces demonstrated here are just outlines of how each of these pieces looked. When moving on to his later life, he created pieces called passions, which were Bible musical interpretations, one of these being well known as the St. Matthew Passion. And unfortunately, around 1720, his first wife passed away, and he eventually remarried to Anna Magdalena Wilken in 1721 during his years in Cothon, Germany. And right here is his wife, his second wife, rather. Nevertheless, they did have 13 children together, with a few of them having survived from disease and whatnot, since disease was a common way to go out during that time. So Johann eventually moved to Leipzig in 1720 and created a significant number of cantatas during his first few years. During that same time, he eventually made the piece Mass in B minor, one of his more famous pieces, around the 1730s. And he actually started a composition, The Art of Fugue, in 1749, before his unfortunate death in 1750. So one of the important things during his later life was his move to Leipzig, since he did create a numerous amount of pieces, and he all around enjoyed his time during Leipzig. So when looking at a few of these pieces he made during his later life, some of the more bigger pieces and more phenomenal pieces were the Mass in B minor, the St. John Passion, and the St. Matthew Passion. So a few of the most important pieces Johann Sebastian created over the course of his life were the Toccata and Fugue in D minor, the Mass in B minor, the Goldberg Variations, the Well-Tempered Clavier, and the Brandenburg Concertos, which were all classical music defining pieces. And if you don't notice how I have a few of these in bold, and the reason for that is mainly because these are among those that that stand out as his greatest achievements. For example, Mass in B minor, besides being a great achievement during his final years, he was also able to present sections of the B minor of Mass in B minor, which were known as the Kyrie and Gloria, to the Elector of Saxony. And then the Well-Tempered Clavier. So what's interesting about the Well-Tempered Clavier is that it was described to be a collection of the most popular types of music during the era. So like dance, arias, motets, concerti, and many others that fit into the composition, as well as consisting of 48 preludes and fugues, while being published into 2 books over the course of his life. And it will always be remembered as the largest scale and significant piece for the solo keyboard during the Baroque period. And I just want to mention that I found these from an article done by Schwarm on the Well-Tempered Clavier, compared to all the other pieces that I found that were all from Marshall and Emery's article on Johann Sebastian Bach. And then last but not least, the Brandenburg Concertos, which included 6 concerti grossi that each demonstrated really phenomenal and mastered techniques of balance between orchestra and groups of soloists. And this article was done by Schwarm on the Brandenburg Concertos. And to go in more depth with these, for example, the first of the concerti, number 1, which utilized solo roles of violin, 3 oboes, 1 bassoon, and 2 horns. So it's really interesting to kind of observe how the difference between each of the concertis and how they utilize different soloists while utilizing an orchestra. So when looking at Johann Sebastian's impact on history, he'll always be remembered as one of the greatest composers of all time because of his contributions to compositions created through churches and otherwise instrumental music. His work during a time of disease and struggle made him a healer to those who were his audience, according to Livy. Though his work was neglected for many years after his death, his music went through a period of revival that gave him more recognition. That includes his work becoming a model for future works, whether it was from his kids who became musicians themselves or others who were inspired by his work. As well, his work had become and added to German music style through his techniques in counterpoint, harmonic organization, and uses of rhythm and texturing. His abilities as an organist demonstrated a highly structured and memorable perspective on music that brought many individuals, including Robert Schumann, to create the Bach Gesellschaft in order to finish Bach's previous work. And what's interesting when I was doing my research on Johann Sebastian Bach was the mindset he had. Johann Sebastian Bach was a very hardworking person. So he believed hard work meant that anyone could get far. He was also arguably the first composer to adapt concerti using keyboard instrument and orchestra. These are the references I used throughout this presentation. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for listening.